So get this, podcast listeners. Andrew Yang, the former presidential candidate in the Democrat side, last election cycle, Andrew Yang, he's starting a new political party. Yes, Andrew Yang is starting a new political party. And my understanding is that the Andrew Yang party is actually one which is going to include Democrats and Republicans, because he's saying that they are helplessly not getting along and they're not speaking to one another. I think that, there's probably a lot of truth to that, by the way. So in the Daily Caller, Andrew Yang says that he's going to start this new party. And there is a lot of critics that are out there calling him a fascist. You can't make this stuff up. So multiple Democrat leaders openly expressed outrage over Andrew Yang starting a nonpartisan political party featuring and fearing that it will only boost Republicans in future elections. Democrat leaders and progressive influencers are calling Andrew Yang a GOP-funded Trojan horse, among other insults, and accusing him of threatening democracy by announcing a third new party that claims to seek common ground between the right and the left. Some critics suggested it will only undermine the Democrat Party and include one leader at the Democrat National Committee who criticized the GOP, calling it a terrorist organization on Twitter. Yang co-published an op-ed with former Republican New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman and former Republican Congressman David Jolly on Wednesday, announcing the creation of the new, quote, Forward Party. This merges three separate movements run by the three founders, all claiming to unite Americans from all ends of the political spectrum. The new Forward Party. And so we have one Democrat operative who writes, and his name is Dash Dabrowski, I'm sick of Andrew Yang. I'm sick of the Forward Party. I'm sick of third-party closet Republican grifters like Jill Stein and Tulsi Gabbard. I'm a ride-or-die Democrat because you're either with the Democrats or you're with the fascists. Yang has made his bed with the fascists. This is what Dash Dabrowski tweeted out. And here's it. Dash Dabrowski in his own words. We have that clip, and here it is.
Andrew Yang does not care about democracy. If Andrew Yang cared about democracy, he would bow out, he would cancel his Forward Party, and he would help the Democrats win in the midterms. But he's not doing that because his ego needs him to be the leader of his followers. And his followers are going to be when he siphons off voters from the Democrats, which will not work because Forward Party and third parties never win elections. In fact, they never even receive over 5% of the electorate. And Andrew Yang knows this. So what is he doing? He is picking apart the Democratic coalition to please his own ego. And what's the cost? American democracy. So guys, mark this video. Andrew Yang, if you think he's bad now, he's gonna get much worse. Do not listen to Andrew Yang. Ignore him. Ignore the Forward Party and continue to support Democrats. We cannot afford to waste any time on these third party candidates.
Can you believe that? His P's were like, puh, we know, puh, 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 like spitting into the microphone. And this is how vitriolic a far left Democrat is. They're absolutely terrified of someone actually creating some new ideas and merging those new ideas with other people who may be from an opposite end of the spectrum and at least finding common ground and trying to work forward. Look, in normal times, that would be something that you would absolutely want to see. Actually, I think that a lot of Americans do want to see that. They do want to see people work when there is common ground. Look, there's no doubt that I'm a conservative, and there's no doubt that I have lots of friends who are conservatives. Here's an example of what Andrew Yang is doing, okay? I'm just trying to give you an example of why this matters. When I meet people who are on the left, there are probably things that I might agree with them on maybe 20% of the time, sometimes 30% of the time. And what are those things? Okay. Well, one of the things that I think both sides agree upon is the need for more mental health care resources. Okay. Mental health care is something that is often ignored. So that's something that you can work with on the other side. You can cross the aisle and shake hands and say, let's work on this together to solve this problem or to make this problem less acute in America. Andrew Yang is trying to do just that. At least that's what he's saying. Okay. And then he becomes an immediate threat to the Democrat Party because Andrew Yang is a former Democrat. He's creating this new party, the Forward Party, which doesn't sound like a right-wing conspiracy to me. But because Andrew Yang is no longer a Democrat, he is a threat, and the Democrat Party thinks that he's going to take away votes from their party, and he very well may. But this is the way a free society works. You get to start a new party if you want to. You get to express your ideas the way you want to. And if you want to solve problems, and you think this is the best way to do it, you have the right to do that as well. But not according to this other dude. What is his name? Dubrovsky? I mean, it's just crazy. And this is your modern Democrat Party. They're terrified of any kind of competition. You must be pure. You must be a purist. You can't work with that Republican across the aisle on mental health issues. You can't do that because that would make you a purist. You would have to be excommunicated from the Democrat Party. And that's stupid. Okay, that's just stupid. Not how we solve problems. And let's face it, this country has big problems. Inflation being one of them. And we certainly don't solve inflation by trying to change the definition of the word, as we talked about earlier. We actually solve inflation by identifying through scientific means what causes it. And we already know what causes inflation. Okay, we know it's a scarcity of products. And so therefore there is a much larger demand than there is a supply. You have a supply problem, or I should say, you have way too much money in the economy because government is pumping too much money into the economy and people are flush with cash and there is a shortage of supply. So therefore prices increase. Makes perfect sense. Andrew Yang wants to try to work on those problems. I'm pretty sure. Okay. Look, I'm not a big fan of Andrew Yang, but I will say this. At least he's bucking the establishment in the Democrat Party, and he's trying to think for himself, which I kind of think personally Andrew Yang was always that way, but I always believe that Andrew Yang wanted to be freer with what he could say in the Democrat debates. And I felt as though his people were scripting him when he was running for the Democrat nomination. And now he doesn't have to be scripted. And this is something that's very important that I think a lot of people out there in podcast land don't understand. I'm in a state legislature, and I can tell you the state legislature that I'm in is controlled overwhelmingly by the far left, okay? Overwhelmingly. And that far left is not allowed to have a diversity of thought or opinion. They cannot do that publicly. They are prohibited. And they are prohibited from voting differently as well. So when a bill is passed in the Maryland General Assembly, that far left votes as a block for that bill. If they do not, if any one person doesn't, they will be absolutely positively demoted, and people will try to get rid of them. They will be primaried. They will lose their primary. The only out for them, if they don't want to vote for a bill, is to go to the speaker and ask for the speaker's permission to not vote for the bill at all. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen this. I've had people sitting in front of me, one person in particular. She sits in front of me, and she's a Democrat. And I personally think that on social issues, she's not on the Democrat train. I personally believe that, meaning that she's much more of a moderate, kind of a middle of the road person. She's pretty religious, in fact, but she's a Democrat. And rather than vote for the Democrats' abortion bills that provide for abortion in the 9th month of pregnancy, which Maryland does, by the way, she gets up from her seat and she leaves. She leaves. In other words, she doesn't vote. She's present at the session, but she doesn't vote for the bill at all. She casts no vote, meaning. And she gets permission from the speaker to do that. But that's the modern Democrat Party. You are prohibited from having diversity of thought. Conversely, in the body where I am elected to in Maryland, the Maryland House of Delegates, another example is this. The Republicans, we routinely vote for and against bills on the very same bill. You'll see some Republicans voting for it, some Republicans voting against a bill, and many times, to be clear, we're all voting against a bill together or for a bill together as well. But we actually have diversity of thought. And I'm not even going to use the term we're allowed to have it, because all of us are very similar in the Republican Party in that if anyone told us, hey, you're allowed to vote differently from the rest of us, it's like, who do you think you are? Of course, I can vote any way I want to. I was sent here by the citizens of the district that I represent, and I vote on behalf of those citizens. I'm not going to vote the way you tell me to vote. One person, a Speaker of the House, that's ridiculous. But the modern Democrat Party doesn't allow diversity of thought. And Andrew Yang, he actually recognized that early on in the Democrat debates. It was very obvious to me that he decided that he couldn't move forward to the Democrat Party because it was either cancel the police or you'd be canceled as a Democrat if you didn't go along with the cancel the police nonsense. And so I think Yang is one of those guys who's like, you know what? There's nowhere for me here. There's no space. And the Democrat Party as a whole, of course, sees him as a threat because Andrew Yang is Asian, and the Democrat Party views themselves as the home for all minorities. And they're not the home for minorities. They're the home for people that refuse to think for themselves. And that's why they're so triggered, the Democrats are, about the Andrew Yang new party, the Forward Party.